Right, so welcome. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the cloud costs control and innovation boost. My name is Robertas Vasaris, and I will be a presenter for today's webinar. So let's look at how the agenda is scheduled and how have we planned today. So in the beginning, we will start a quick introduction from myself. Then we will jump into the introduction to the FinOps. The next section is resource utilization, efficiency, and wastage. We will dive deeper a little bit into the cloud cost optimization. And at the end of the session, we will cover the organizational alignment and leadership's role, as well as forecasting and budgeting. Right, so before we start talking about the FinOps and all the pain points that I just have mentioned, I would like to present myself. So my name is Robertas. I'm working as a senior FinOps consultant right now. On the side, I'm also a member and a trainer at the FinOps Foundation. So just yesterday, I was co-teaching a course of 32 potential practitioners that are about to get certified together with the FinOps Foundation. My history, I'm coming from the financial sector, so I've been working as the IT analyst in one of the financial banks here in Europe. And in my experience, I have also managed to develop my own e-commerce business for a little while. But I would say like I'm a little bit better consultant than the business owner or business developer. So a couple of years, I managed to keep it alive. And then at the end of the day, I decided to close that. It wasn't something really for me. I wasn't too successful on that side. So from a technical certification areas or from the skill set areas, as you can see, I have also listed some of the things that I managed to achieve. So I am an admin level on the Microsoft Azure, so to say. I'm also a solution architect level on the AWS. And I have also marked a couple of FinOps related certifications, which includes a certified practitioner. And I am currently in the progress of being professional certified. So that's short history about me. Right, so the introduction to the FinOps. In general, most of the organizations are still currently in a massive transformation of their IT estate and their corresponding IT companies. So coming from traditional IT organizations with data centers and servers and installed software that was mainly focusing on provisioning infrastructure, reducing the running costs, maintaining the core functionality, and minimizing the risks as much as possible to ensure secure, productive operations. Now more focused on the evolution of the IT, becoming more service-oriented, implementing the agile methodology and increasing the flexibility, also mainly done by automation and scalability of the cloud environment. So one of the main goals currently is to support and accelerate of innovations, to create new services for the organization's clients, which will at the end of the day will benefit the initial organization. In most cases, this whole development, of course, was accelerated rather than slowed down by still recent coronavirus, but therefore most organizations are already using or planning to use the cloud technologies. So the main reasons for the company is to migrate to cloud scenarios or to be interested in general into these technologies is, of course, to leverage those possibilities and opportunities that are out there. And one of the biggest opportunity is, of course, that they would like to develop and create new business ideas for the internal and external customers. So leveraging technical innovation and technical possibilities that are provided and given in the cloud that will also help them to cope with an increasing tasks and requirements that they will face internally and externally. Another thing that organizations are eager to do is also to reduce the cost for IT and to maximize that agility and flexibility to their IT operations. So with the opportunities and possibilities, of course, comes some certain challenges and risks, especially with the utilization of new technologies. So of course, with the given pricing model of cloud services, whenever you are leveraging certain resources, you are directly, immediately creating costs on your side. Demand-based usage and billing can also be reflected in increasing higher costs. There's also a big challenge for organizations when it comes to the necessary knowledge and experience in new technologies, concepts, and also working models. So if you're in the cloud transformation, it might also be that the current operating model and processes that are not really compatible and not supporting the new working together in cloud environments and cloud technologies. So we've got few challenging areas like forecasting. Cloud costs are not always completely transparent. It can really become a huge challenge to forecast, and also based on the forecast, also to budget accordingly. Engineers are not acting on the optimization areas that could be in front of them. These people are usually interested into the best services SLA, and therefore sometimes they are provisioning not right sized resources in general. We cannot really blame them, because that's the whole idea. They really want to create a good services, perfect SLAs, that everything is smooth and available at any time. However, it can really get rather pricey very quick. Another thing is that resources are not really being allocated, and therefore responsibilities are not clear. Who's responsible for that? Who has created? Who is bearing the costs of that? So increased efforts due to the necessary adaptation and modernization of the operating model. Different environments operated differently or individually. At the end, a demand-based usage and billing can also be reflected in instances in increasing costs, where we could potentially look into our RI or committed use discounts, saving plans, depending on the cloud provider. There can be some models that you can take into account, and that could help and ease your pain in the future. In general, several years ago, that whole traditional IT spend was much different compared to what it is today. So traditionally, when people making decisions around IT investments, like adding storage to a data center or adding services or servers to a data center, you typically have IT leaders creating that whole technical assessment and determining what the costs would be. Business leaders would make a business case, for example, for justifying and making that investment. The finance team would essentially evaluate the cost, and the procurement would negotiate perhaps a contract, or would negotiate some of those costs down. What we have here is collectively a team effort. And once the decision was made, then that capital expenses was made. In the background, there is a long time cycle for all of this to happen. From ideation to mapping all the resources was needed, the cost was needed, to actually receiving the hardware, implementing it and installing, and finally getting value from it. So once that was done though, there was really little pressure to optimize. In fact, companies that were spending millions of dollars on their data centers wanted to get value from that quickly, and didn't really necessarily matter to them how efficient it was. Today, there are lots of changes. So we have decision-making team that is not necessarily working together. So we have engineers or just people with credit cards that are able to invest in new business ideas. They are able to innovate. They are also able to be more agile and faster. And those are really great things. I mean, those are the things why we are leveraging the cloud. The problem with that is that we've gone so far away from having this team working together and making decisions to individuals making those decisions. And those individual driven decisions most likely will benefit their KPIs in particular. So engineer or developer is focused on speed or quality, or not necessarily the cost that is on top of their mind, right? As a result, you get significantly different characteristics than the ones from traditional IT spend. So these differences are primarily because they are operating expenses. They are short, immediate, and don't require the same amount of oversight that finance and procurement used to provide in the past. So the ability to do this in many individuals' hands, as opposed of the teams making decisions, and as a result of these decisions have been made, oftentimes the cloud budget unfortunately is out of control, and therefore an individual is assigned to the cloud invoice. They're really the primary persona. And the reason why that person is so critical to talk to about FinOps, because this whole story will resonate with them. They have been handed a project to optimize this cloud spend and to fix cloud invoices due to this over expenditure, over budget, inability to forecast. All of these things create this need and urgency for the FinOps framework. So my personal opinion that nowadays, especially when companies are leveraging the cloud, unfortunately, they cannot really survive or plan the future without the FinOps framework in place, without having control, without keeping balance. So what is FinOps? So in general, FinOps is all about give me a second, I'll open the whole slide right away. So FinOps is all about keeping the balance between the innovation and the control and management. So on one side, too much management sort of might kill that innovation. On the other side, too much innovation would get rather expensive quite quickly. Some of the most important goals for the organizations leveraging cloud technology are the development of new business ideas and offerings like next gen of their products, data as of the core components of the digital and business transformation. Just as an example, like analyzing information with regards to the customer's behavior with machine learning methodologies, as well as utilizing new technologies usually require a certain level of flexibility and could really result an increase of cost. With the implementation of rules and control mechanisms, it is important not to limit technical opportunities provided by technical innovations of cloud, but again, rather trying to find that balance in between innovation and cost and management. So in essence, it is very important to understand that FinOps is an evolving discipline. So at the same time, it can be very challenging exercise with three main phases that each of them has its own maturity, meaning that during each maturity phase, you will have different challenges in front of you and focus on the right things at the right time. And it is going to make your life easier. It will help you to save time and money. You should believe me on this one. You will be doing some activities from these domains every single day or every single week at least as you go through the FinOps practice. You have to onboard that whole FinOps idea and framework in mind that this is new operating model. This helps to run your business and get the most out of the cloud. Working with multiple different teams like engineers, finance, business owners, you're going to be that key bridge between all of them, helping them to speak the same common FinOps language. So when we look at the FinOps lifecycle, we have like Agile, DevOps, or other modern methodologies. We practice FinOps in that loop, making small incremental changes to our infrastructure as we advanced. So we describe this approach using that whole life cycle, which comprised of three phases. We have inform phase where you create visibility. You look at what you are using and where, you set the budgets, you set the certain thresholds, you create transparency around that whole cloud estate. We also have optimized phase, which is the next one. It's basically where you look for ways to improve, build business cases, look for right sizing opportunities, look for opportunities in general, how to get and start using only what is really necessary for you to get up to the service level that you really want to have, not overspending somewhere where it's really not necessary. The last phase is the operate phase. This is basically where you take action, you make decisions, you enact that whole business cases, execute on the opportunities that you have found. You also try to align on the organizational level, whether it's the bottom-up approach or you have a certain FinOps mandates in the organization. It is necessary to speak loudly about what has been achieved and what exactly you're doing. So the important part of this is not to be, dogmatic about it or moving between phases, but rather to have regular cycle process to your analysis and work as you conduct that FinOps function at the time. At first, it might take a while to perform the work in each phase, and you may be more explicit about moving from one to another, but over time, the cycle of looking at the stage, looking for opportunities to improve, and then taking that incremental action step will become much more fluid and natural. Ultimate goal is to exercise those cycles frequently and quickly, of course, as possible, as to include as much automation as possible to help all those processes to run through smoothly. Also eliminate the possibility for any human error. So if you're running your reports automatically, you are making this way much more advanced rather than doing it manually every single week or month. So in this way, basically, your culture will change. You will increase accountability, and that whole governance that is possible to you, it will support your FinOps function. When we look at the FinOps maturities, so of course, starting at the crawl, you do not try to boil the ocean or achieve 100% reserve instances coverage all at once. There is no value judgment here. Every organization is not at the same level. Every organization does not need to be at the same level. Each capability can be different level of maturity, as well as not everyone needs to have a super advanced chargeback structure or a highly optimized reserve instances portfolio management structure. So mature the capabilities that provide your company strategic value, that makes sense to your organization. Do not attempt to build full solutions, but build only the amount of the solution that you need at any given case. You are not doing better if you are operating a capability at the run level. You should build a capability to run when it provides you business value. If you're running and it's not adding value, you're basically wasting your most precious resource, which is time. And again, lastly, when we look at the personas, key to all of the FinOps practice is the need to support a variety of different personas across the business. So FinOps is really all about the collaboration. Each of these personas represents a different discipline or different part of the business. Each brings its own particular motivations and backgrounds to the discussion, and those are absolutely key and necessary for further development. So it is really important to bring the different people from different background for the successful practice. Right, so what we will be doing today, we will look, I have marked the domains that we will be touching lightly today. So we will be looking at the resource utilization, which is part of cloud usage optimization domain. We will be looking at the cloud wastage and cloud cost optimization in general. That is also part of cloud rate optimization. We will check what is in the organizational alignment and leadership's role in FinOps journey, which is the last domain. Forecasting and budgeting, that's always exciting and interesting topic. It is part of performance tracking and benchmarking. So these are the few things that we will be focusing today. Right, so the first thing, resource utilization and efficiency and wastage. In the FinOps book, the authors cover something called the Prius effect. And it is a phenomenon when a hybrid Toyota Prius introduced a real-time feedback on gasoline consumption. It was observed and documented that a large subset of drivers would respond to the data by driving in a manner that decreased fuel consumption. In a regular car, you get info about your mileage. And if at the time when you fuel up, you can take a receipt, and with a little bit of math, you can calculate the consumption and efficiency of the past period that you've been driving your car. However, since it's not an instant feedback, you don't really have that light on that says drive economically. You're not really paying as much attention to that. The point is that with continuous feedback, when you need to use all the power at your disposal, you can, of course, make that conscious decision to do so, and the car will support it. But for normal conditions, the continuous feedback provided on usage tends to drive responsible behavior. So it is with the cloud. FinOps teams should strive to provide continuous, simple, clean feedback to users of cloud to keep them driving it economically. So engineering teams responsible for their cloud use will respond to cost information and use it in an efficiency metric, which is exactly what we want as the FinOps community. It doesn't just work for engineers. So putting a good user interface in front of any of our persona stakeholders make a huge, tremendous difference in keeping cloud optimization in mind. So this is just something that you should think of. Another thing that we will be talking about is engineers taking the action, and that quite many years in a row, this is one of the main pain points for the FinOps, for the organizations, that engineers are not really taking those actions in mind. They are super busy people. They are doing tons of really great things, and just optimization is not, on top of their mind. From my personal experience, I would say that I haven't seen anything like gamifications effect. No matter if you give these people bonuses, if you try to motivate them in a different way, if you put the picture on the wall, there is nothing that I've seen compared to the gamification. So engineers and the tech people, they apparently love that, the way, to give them feedback, the way to appreciate the efforts. So I would just like to share that, from my experience, this has been quite successful exercise to include that into the getting their attention, getting them on the table, because at the end of the day, you are not an enemy to anyone in the organization. What you want to is to increase transparency, increase accountability in the organization, and just so you understand where the costs are moving, who is consuming that for what purpose. And basically it gives you the data that helps you to make the future decisions. Right, the definition. So in general, getting value from the cloud resources is a critical FinOps capability. And the aim is to match the configuration of each cloud resources to the demand placed upon it and at the time that demand occurs. So in essence, what we are aiming to do is to find lowest cost solution that would deliver performance required for that particular solution. So let's look at what do we mean actually by the terms utilization and efficiency? So utilization is the ratio between used capacity and available capacity. The costs of the cloud resources will be typically related to the available capacity, and the higher that capacity is, the greater costs is likely to be. So our aim should be to purchase only the available capacity that is required to meet that demand. With cloud, another aim is, of course, to maximize our business value. In general, lowering availability capacity to raise utilization would also raise business value. So by delivering the same performance at the lower cost, with a connection between utilization and business value, it is worth of noting of a couple of special cases. Just as an example, obvious zero utilization, but has a significant business value. And the second case where the zero business value, but you may observe significant utilization. So in general, utilization is a good indicator, but in order to understand the real business value, we need to understand that what the system is doing. And to do that, it will be crucial to talk to the people that can explain what the business value of your company actually is. And the efficiency of any system is generally stated as a ratio of output to its input. So the efficiency of 50% means that you're getting out of the system 50% of your energy you put into. We can think of technical efficiency of the cloud resource as ratio of its output, whatever that is, to its cost. That it can be very useful measure in general. So just as an example, a system that processes 100 transactions for a cost of $2 could be considered to have an efficiency of 50 transactions per $1, or to put it another way, an efficiency of 2 cents per transaction. So this becomes an even more useful measure to FinOps if there is a clear business value to the output we are measured. The resulting measure of business efficiency may be a great relevance to the business and helps to win support that whole FinOps initiatives we're aiming to improve. For example, if an efficiency of 40 cents per customer request can be improved to 30 cents per request, this is likely to be important to the organization. So finally, as we know, the energy efficiency and sustainability are really becoming more and more important to the organizations. Energy efficiency is measured as the ratio of business value to the energy consumed in producing it. Organizations around the globe using it to drive data-driven insights to run their business, to measure efficiency and improve business value. Just as an example, we can have Netflix business value to the costs of making movie or series. So how much are we actually spending there and how many people are really watching? What's the ratio there? Internal algorithms are analyzing how many subscribers are watching that particular show and maintaining their subscription, or some ways terminate it, and bunch of other factors that basically add the value to the organization. On the other side of the scale, fully loaded costs, which includes production plus delivery plus marketing, basically to determine which shows should receive a further investment. So this information helps the organizations to make the better decisions in the future that really drives their businesses. You've seen perhaps many reports stating that, by year X, there is about 25%, 30% of cloud spend is wasted, which is aimed to attract leaders' attention for cloud costs, efficiency, and how to optimize it. But what does waste actually really mean in this context? The implication of waste is that there is some minimum cost for delivering performance required by a given demand pattern, and any spend above that figure is a waste. Sounds logical, but not really too helpful, right? So what is this minimum cost? How can it be calculated? In practice, it might be very difficult to do that. It may be possible in some circumstances to calculate it, but not always and really necessary. So you can define waste for FinOps purpose in terms of 3 types of waste. So we have absolute waste, which gives you 0 business value. And honestly, you should get rid of that as soon as possible. So we will talk about cloud cost optimization and the workflow that I would recommend you to follow. But absolute waste, just remind it, get rid of it as soon as you can. We can also have configuration waste. That's the resources that could be configured in a way to deliver the same performance for lower costs. This requires a little bit of work to be done. And lastly, architectural waste, system designs that could deliver the same value, but requires re-architecturing. So clearly decreasing waste will improve your business value. Start by absolute waste, as I mentioned, then move to configurational waste, and then might be worth of looking at re-architecturing waste. Again, you always need to measure how much we're going to save and how much we're going to actually spend, because if timing required for re-architecturing surpass the savings that you might get, it might not be really worth it. So why is resource utilization and efficiency so important? It is foundations for the FinOps practice. At first, it drives quick wins for usage and optimization. It also confirms a validity of FinOps approach to investors, to our management, to the stakeholders that you're working with. It also frees up IT budget, which can be fund more productive activities to add significant business value elsewhere. Visible cost savings encourage engineering teams to adopt new practices, which makes them a little bit more cost aware. And establishing a collaborative approach to cloud value improvement involving technical, business, and finance teams. It also supports the sustainability goals of the organization, that there is a tendency that more and more organizations gets this on the table. So the next topic that we have is the cloud cost optimization. In general, there are 3 primary ways to optimize your usage. We could have workload management, also knowing turning things on only when you really need them. However, that does not work for all of the workloads. In general, going from 24/7 to 12 hours, 5 days a week, it gives you almost 64% reduction. If you can go down to 8 hours, 5 days a week, even better, you will get up to 78% savings. Similarly, like you are turning the lights and shower off when you're done using it, the bathroom, right? So you should turn off cloud stuff when you're not really using it. Automate wherever it's possible. Another way is scalability and elasticity. So the primary idea is to use a number of smaller resources to accomplish a task or support a workload, such as the demands of the workload vary over the time. The number of small resources can be adjusted. Thirdly, right sizing. I will talk about it in the second, but in general, right sizing is a collaborative effort, and this is how you should approach it in the organization. FinOps centralized team cannot really do this on their own, and they really need support from the rest of the businesses. So when we look at the cloud cost optimization workflow, there are certain things that I personally recommend to do first based on the logic of the wastage. So orphan resources. Public cloud providers generally charge for any existing resource in your infrastructure, even though if it's isn't actively used at that particular moment. It is very easy to enable small feature and capabilities for testing and then forget to clean them up afterwards. So if we take one example in Microsoft side, so if you delete a virtual machine in Azure, by default, any disks that are attached to the VM, they aren't deleted per default. This feature helps to provide basically the secure way and prevent the data loss due to the unintentional deletion of the VMs. And after VM is deleted, you will continue to pay for unattached disks. So just as an example, orphan resources appear to be something that is not used or are in very low demand. And it could include disks, managed disks that currently are not attached to any VM. It could be IP addresses that currently are not associated to any resources. It could be the VMs with the maximum CPU utilization of less than 3 or 5% over the period of time. So these resources should be carefully reviewed and then determined if the resource in question should be deleted or at least archived. Once deleted, they cannot be recovered. So you really need to be sure about it. And IP addresses might not longer be available there. So you really need to talk to the business owners, or not the business owners, but the service owners, the people that have created those services, if it's really the case. Another one, once we have identified and cleaned up the unused resources, we could see if there's anything out there for free. And again, there's just an example, DevTest offering. So it is an enterprise offer that Microsoft offers certain Azure resources such as Microsoft Server licenses or other products at reduced costs. So in a nutshell, this offer is meant to use in non-production dev and test environments in conjunction with the Microsoft MSDN licensing agreed rights. So if that particular resource is isolated and is used only for test and dev, you should double check if it cannot be for free or if it cannot be for a lower cost that are out there. And only once these things done, once you identify what is unused, what is really just idle there and you have forgotten, that is removed. If you have identified things that you can get for free or at the lower cost, you can look at the right sizing activities. Even though some applications may require by design capabilities that seems oversight, somehow an apparent low utilization of its resources. In this scenario, an important amount of savings can be done by adjusting the size and the number of virtual machines in your infrastructure. So VMs whose workload can fit in a smaller machine or a smaller number of instances, such as current load doesn't go over 80% on non-user facing workloads or doesn't go above 40% of user facing workloads, the owner of those VMs should be consulted to confirm that the machine resources can be right-sized in order to avoid underperformance situations. So you really need to keep that in mind, that There are lots of ways and strategies how to get it done. Some organizations are even doing it that they are provisioning certain services in lower smaller machine sizes on purpose, and they are testing out how is it working. Is it really does it really create some issues? Is someone really complaining about it, and so on? So you of course, if your main business is the certain user interface, you don't want to try it out on your production, but the internal facing applications and so on, why not? Another thing is automation, and this is something that I have briefly touched upon. So 24/7 versus 12 hours, 5 days a week, or even 8 hours, 5 days a week. It can provide you many hours and many dollar savings in doing those things. You can identify once the workloads are in use, you can automate these things as well. But I would say you will automate these things once you mature in your FinOps journey. Another thing, instance modernization. So as new technology becomes more powerful and cheaper, public cloud providers occasionally upgrade their resources with a better price or higher capability. So instance modernization is about paying the best price for the same resource while maintaining or improving its capabilities. So the owner of VM, of course, should be consultant to determine if the machine can be changed to the new version, since some technical specifications can slightly change. There will also be a small downtime associated with the VM type change. We are recommending this because there is a newer version for better price. So basically you can get newer car for paying less in the future. So at the end of the day, you need to think about the future. So even though it can cost you a little bit of downtime right now, maybe it's a perfect solution because you will save much more in the future. Cross-regional optimization, well, I would say this one is applicable a little bit more to Azure. So as you know, when the new data center is being built, it is quite empty. And I'm not talking about the spot instances here. In general, different region data centers, they have a different pricing. And surprisingly enough, when the data center is a little bit more empty than the others, the cloud providers are throwing the significant discounts there. So you can really save quite a bit, especially if you're doing some test and dev things. Not necessarily I'm recommending to move some production things there, but definitely for test and dev purposes, that you are trying some new services out or something for a day or two or a week, you can definitely try it for the cheaper price. And reserve instances, of course, everyone is aware of that. You could potentially save more money if you're committing yourself to 1 or 3 years. So those discounts really varies on the type of the services that you are purchasing. However, committing yourself on the certain products, you need to be 100% confident that you will be using. So now different cloud providers offers you a different solutions, different workarounds. Some things can be really changed. Some things cannot be changed afterwards, but you really need to be confident that you will be using it, because for that commitment, you are taking the risks, not the cloud provider. And there are a couple of additional ones like hybrid use benefit or bring your own licenses. Whenever you have made certain investments in the past on premise and whatnot, you could double check if there's a good use of that, if you can benefit from that in the cloud. But this is the workflow chart that I would personally recommend. Firstly, removing something that is unused and then trying to re-architecture it, right size, and automate things. And only then, lastly, to commit yourself for the longer period of time, because you don't want to start with a commitment and then you are doing the right sizing, because at the end of the day, it might show that you're not really saving at the full potential. Right. So we also have organizational alignment and leadership's role. So the most challenging step is to achieve the alignment with the company's executive team that FinOps needs to be adopted. The process is only effective with intentionally an alignment from the C-level and VPs. They must be able to set the vision, motivate their teams, and build that whole collaboration and coalition of that. So creation of FinOps team, steering committee, if you want to call that, that will be responsible and accountable for that whole FinOps adoption. This team will define the procedures, timelines, best practices to be implemented. Cross-functional representation is critical, as I already mentioned. A team must have at least one member from engineering, operation, DevOps, and finance to advocate for change through the individual experience from their respective disciplines. Meaningful communication is critical component of FinOps. So communication must be timely, relevant, and specific to the intended audience. Most definitely not one size fits all. For example, to succeed, companies must explain to engineers why they need to keep the costs in mind and what process to follow. As I also mentioned, the communication is key when you are providing timely feedback to the technical team about the utilization of their created resource. It really changes the behavior and it really supports that further adoption of the FinOps. Fourthly, we have continuous, engaged, and sustained education. Most importantly, FinOps is a process involving people and behavior. Secondly, targeted business and technology action. So you need to understand that in the middle, in the core of the FinOps, there's actually people and behavior. And from my experience, I can share that this will be the most challenging part to be implementing, actually, not the technical side, not the automation, not the tagging, not the other capabilities out there, but it will be actually people, resistance, and the behavior. That's what you will have to work on. Also adjusting through the continuous learning. So each work stream and FinOps process is unique. It may not really apply to every scenario. So FinOps adoption team must commit to regular sync ups to control the results, inquire, involve, and engage the people involved in the FinOps process, learn from the data, learn from the behaviors, and adjust when really necessary. Some obvious and still needs to be stated. Knowing the correct questions to ask the correct people I can't really ask an engineer how to process a payroll, and probably wouldn't ask a developer about the network security. So there are certain things that it's really worth asking yourself. It's really worth asking your organization that will help you to determine the further strategy of the FinOps alignment. Now I can see we are running a little bit out of time. So I will have to jump to the next section, which is the last one for today. So forecasting and budgeting. Forecasting is the practice of predicting future spending. Usually it is based on a combination of historical spending and the evaluation of future plans. So understanding how future cloud infrastructure and application lifecycle changes may really impact current budgets and influence budget planning and future cloud investments decisions. So this capability also involves collaboration between stakeholders, different teams like finance, engineering, executives to build agreed upon the forecast models and KPIs from which to establish budgets that align with business goals. Accurate financial forecasting depends on the organization's other FinOps capabilities, also being robust in order to provide accurate data as input. So for example, a foundational element of forecasting is the FinOps capabilities to fully categorize and allocate cloud costs. When a finance, engineering, and executives build models to forecast cloud spend reliably and accurately, cloud cost forecast will inform investment and operational decisions to accelerate the organization's growth. So we have budget management, is how organizations align spending with its strategic plan. We have budget owners. These are expected to manage their spending so that it remains within the budget allocated to them. Let's look at the state of FinOps data. So this is the, you probably are aware of the survey that FinOps is doing every single year. And what I like to pay your attention is actually, of course, 30% of respondents have said that the biggest challenge for them is getting engineers to take action on cost optimization. And this challenge remains as the top couple of years in a row. But I actually would like to point out the second 29% one, accurate forecast on spend. And this is across all of the maturity customers. This is one of the top pain points, how accurately forecast on spend. Let's look at how forecast is happening. So with forecasts, as with so many other cloud management capabilities, frequency and granularity are the key factors in improving the effectiveness. More granular and more frequent generally means more accurate. The more factors you can take into account in your forecast, the better it is. So the aim is to get input from more people, covering more possibilities, building up forecasts by aggregating detailed forecasts into the higher level ones, and also looking at existing high level forecasts and breaking these down into meaningful components. Forecasting is quite an easy discipline to have with some fun. If you measure how accurate your forecasts are week to week or month to month, then you can really track your accuracy and set progressively through the targets for you and your team to hit. So how does the measures of success looks like? So forecasting in general is one of the greatest challenges, as you have seen from the survey of the FinOps Foundation too. And there is no forecasting method that fits all situations. So frequency and granularity are the key factors in improving effectiveness. More granular and more frequent generally means more accurate. And again, the more factors you can take into account, the better it is. The aim is to get insight not only from your FinOps community inside the organization, but from the overall business. Is someone doing a new project? Is someone starting a new application? Is someone doing lift and shift from on-premise to the cloud? All of these things needs to be taken into account. General rule, or what the practitioners have responded in the how accurate the forecast can be is based on the maturity stage. So if you're in the crawl phase, you expect it to have like 20% variance. If you're on the walk, it is lower, it's 15%. And if you run, as at 12%. Again, from my experience, I worked with the companies that were not accurate by a couple of 100%, meaning that throughout the year, they figure out that something that they have forecasted went twice or triple beyond that. So it's not really a big deal if you are just a beginner in that. But as long as you mature in your stage, you really need to get control over that. So how to get better at the forecasting? A couple of ideas, as I already mentioned. Forecast more often, forecast more granular, forecast for specific things. So you should break down and forecast those specific things. Forecast using multiple scenarios, forecast bottom up and top down. So again, you should look at the top down from the management, how they could expect the forecast to get, but also you should go from the bottom up. So talking to your field workers, talking with your engineers, talking with people that actually implements all of those things, and bottom up, getting the insights from everyone. Involve more people in the forecasting, and again, make it a game with a fun afterwards. You could also do with some penalties at the end. Budgeting, this is super closely related thing with a forecast. So if we look at the different crawl phases, crawl, walk, and run, in the beginning, you might see the budgeting at the general enterprise level. Accuracy will be low, finance tracks actuals to the budget perhaps quarterly. If you mature throughout the stages, it will get that accuracy and the frequency a little bit under control. So you will not do budgets at the enterprise level. You will rather break it down to the individual team, projects, subscriptions, and etc. You will involve more people as you mature in those stages, and you will get better at that. So I will not spend too much time on this one since it's really closely connected. We still have 7 minutes of the time left, so I'm nearly on time, but we would like to allocate some time for you to ask some questions if you have any. If you don't have any, again, I would like to invite you to connect with me. You can scan this QR code. You can reach me out if you have any questions after the session, or if you have forgotten the session. This is the QR code linked to my LinkedIn profile. So feel free to reach me out, ask some questions, or discuss some things with me. Right. So any questions from the audience of today? So far, I can see just an empty webinar chat, but feel free to drop it anything that you might have on your heart. If you agree or disagree, feel free to tell your opinion. If there's something that you would like to discuss about, just feel free to shout out. Let's perhaps give a couple of more minutes if anyone is typing some questions, but I don't see anything coming in the chat for now. Thank you, Alexei. Hopefully there will be something that you can at least think of, maybe create a discussion internally in your organization, think through some things. Again, in general, I would say, FinOps is a live framework, a live way of doing things. So even though there are certain solutions that fit certain issues at this particular time, it's not necessarily the best solution suited for tomorrow. This evolves as it goes. New services are being introduced by cloud providers. Today I have covered only a couple of the topics, couple of the functionalities with couple of domains. Fundamentally, I would say that the whole background, the whole backbone of the FinOps is, of course, the inform phase. So increasing that transparency, all the things about the metadata and some additional things that hopefully there will be another webinar to cover some of these topics a little bit more in depth. But this is the key fundamental, how you want to see the data, how you want to do the showbacks. What's the way that makes business value to you, to your organization, that gives you the insights that you want to see? Because data, you can show it and visualize in so many different ways, as you perhaps are aware. So it's really key fundamentally to go through each of these stages and not focus at everything at once, because you will not get really the effect that you want. Building certain KPIs is also a key element into the FinOps framework. However, I'm not super big fan of the KPIs because quite often it drives the certain behavior from the people. So you really need to think through how are you measuring things. So I would say, certain KPI that's saving 15% every year might be not the most sustainable KPI, because you will have to put more and more effort into getting more value out of your work. So in the beginning, once you start the journey, there are so many low-hanging fruits. Once you harvest those low-hanging fruits, your management can set the bar quite high, and they will expect the same or even more next year. But the reality is that to get the same effect next year, you will have to work twice as hard. And sometimes it's not even possible to do that. So you really need to understand that focusing on the right things at the right time is the key. As you evolve, you will introduce more automation solutions to avoid the human error in those. It will also help you, certain documentation, it helps you if there are any changes in the organization. Right. As of now, I do not see any additional questions in the chat. If you are still thinking about asking something, you have about 1 minute until we will close the webinar. So feel free to do that. If not, as I said, I invite you to connect with me. If on the other side, if you have more questions, feel free to contact Professea. If there are any questions, I would recommend to contact their lead architect, Anton, amazing person that will help you to solve your technical issues with the cloud challenges that you're facing. Super. thank you very much for today, and I wish everyone a very nice evening.